All right, grasshoppers. Unfortunately, we're still stuck with Mark, but we have another guest here, a very special guest. Again, Mark Puttenvig, Patriot Training Systems is his company, and we've got a former Delta. Do I call you former? Is that the right way to?
Yeah,
or retired.
I would say former special operations guy.
Okay.
Yeah,
Perfect. I like that. Good. I'll let Mark introduce Zach. This is our new friend Zach Harrison. Mark, you're up.
Hey Zach. So I met Zach probably 3 years ago already. Zach.
yeah, probably about that. Yeah.
Yeah, we were both working out up at Apex, which is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school, and a good friend of ours, Jay Gawk, was running. It was for law enforcement, military, stuff like that. And that's when I first met Zach. And besides a great workout, I met a great human being. And Zach, I think is yesterday I went to the Tunnel of Towers run, and when you hear the stories of all the special operators and the first responders and the fire department and EMS and all the groups that coalesce that day to respond, it's similar to what motivates a lot of guys to go into the military that didn't plan on it. And I think, Zach, that was kind of your story.
Yeah, absolutely, man, for sure.
Well, let's tell that story. Zach, where are you from originally?
I was born and raised in Richmond, Virginia. Yeah, I grew up in Central Virginia. My mom and dad both grew up in that area, and that was home until I went off to college, and then I moved back there for a few years after college, and then I enlisted. When I went into the military, I went into the Army from Virginia. So,
okay. And what's interesting too is that wasn't really your chosen field, right? You would started some other career after college.
Yeah, I tell people all the time when we do our courses on the morning of the first day, we always get up and tell our clients, students, we give them a background on where we came from, and the reason we do that is so they understand who is what the experience level is, and we're establishing credibility with our target audience. So I think it's a good practice to do for people who teach a skill. But yeah, I grew up. I had aspirations of being a pro athlete, and that's really was all I cared about, or my main focus as a child and through high school was playing sports. It's just I loved team sports. I played football, basketball, and baseball year round. I swam a little bit, but those were my three kind of passions. And then I ended up going to college. Went to a small Division I school in North Carolina. It's called Elon. It was called college when I went.
Sure.
And then my senior year, they switched it to a university. So I played football down there for a little while, and I just, I didn't have the talent and the size and the speed, to go to the next level in any sport. So the next best thing for me was to become a teacher and coach. And I grew up in a family. My mother was a career educator, and I saw a very big impact that she had on people throughout her time teaching and being a principal. And I knew I wanted to be involved with football and baseball and stuff like that. So that was the next best thing for me. So that's what I did for a couple of years. And then, 9/11 happened right after I graduated, the fall after I graduated from college, graduated in the spring of 2001 and started working in the summer at a school system. And then we all know what happened, in September. And it was, I knew things were going to change a little bit after that. That's kind of what led me into a recruiter's office. And the next thing you know, not too long down the road on a bus down to Fort Benning, Georgia. So that's kind of what set it up.
So you didn't have any military aspirations prior to 9/11, right?
Zero. And I went to it's funny because, I wasn't a bad kid, but I found trouble,
Oh, is that right?
quite a bit when I was younger. And my mom and dad kind of saw that I was going the wrong direction, as a young teenager. And after my freshman year of high school, they sent me to a military Catholic school, which is still up and running in Virginia. It's called Benedictine High School, and it was probably one of the best decisions they ever made for me. Not that the military aspect of it inserted all this discipline in me, but I needed a little bit more structure at that time in my life, and going to an all boys school where we could just be boys and try to learn how to be men from good male role models within that school really helped me. But I did not like it. I did not like, people outranking me and telling me to do push-ups and making me do marching after school if I was late somewhere. Like, I wasn't a fan of that, but it was a necessary thing that I didn't even know I needed at the time, so yeah.
Yeah, I was like that. I grew up on a farm up in Canada, dairy farm, and I hated it when I was on the farm, right? And I look back now, and every success I've ever had in my life comes from that experience. The work ethic, do the right thing. So I agree with him. It is amazing, right? When you're a kid, you don't realize all the lessons you're getting that are really helping you in life. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and I just had some really good male role models at pivotal points in my life. My dad being one of them, my uncle being one of them. And sports coach, I had some coaches that I will never forget. Some are still here, some are not, but that type of stuff, man, I think really kind of, when the towers came down on that day, it affected all of us, and I was in Virginia, and the Pentagon is 90 miles from where I grew up, and I spent a lot of, we'd go up to DC quite a bit when I was younger and and stuff like that. And my uncle at the time was working in DC, and it was something that I knew something was telling me it's your time. Like, you need to go do this. So that was kind of the catapult in.
Very good. So anybody that's just joined us, this is Zach Harrison, former Special Forces. And we have one of our veterans on here that follows us all the time, Barry Shelley. What's up there, Barry? How are you doing, brother? So Barry was military police, right, Mark?
Yeah, he was in the Air Force. He was stationed in Korea.
Good dude. Does a lot for everybody. He's a good man. Big heart.
Nice. Does a lot for the veteran community.
So, awesome. So Zach, when you go into the military, you don't go right to Delta Force then?
No. That's not how it works. But I did. So there was this program. It was called the 18 X-ray program. 18 series is the MOS nomenclature for U.S. Army Special Forces, which are Green Berets. I was speaking with my uncle, one of my uncles, who is in the Virginia National Guard when I was going to recruiter, and he kind of let me know, like, hey man, you need to know what you want to do, and you need to stand firm on what you want and get the contract that you want, because if you don't, you're going to the needs of the Army. And I did a lot of reading in the first year of the war, right after, we got troops in there, and I just was reading about these SF guys, these Green Berets. And, obviously they're not the only ones that were involved early on, but, the horse soldiers and all these stories about Tora Bora and them linking up with the Northern Alliance. And it just really piqued my attention, man. And I started reading, and I would get books, and I would read articles online. I'm like, who are these guys and what the hell do they do? And I just determined that, hey, I wanted to go try for that. And that 18 X-ray contract was first implemented. A lot of people don't know this, but it was first implemented in Vietnam, which was truly our first large scale counterinsurgency, on that type of scale. The Special Forces guys were linking up and doing, and I read all this stuff about these SF guys in Vietnam, and so that program came out because they realized this is not going to be it's not World War II or the Korean War, where it's going to be our lines, your lines, tanks, uniforms, here we go. It was going to be guerrilla warfare and an insurgency, and that's Army Green Berets. That's their bread and butter, is counterinsurgency. So that program came back in right after not too long after 9/11, and I was fortunate enough to get meet the prerequisites and get the contract, and then it was my job to make it through a couple gates and then get to selection, and obviously pass through that. And I was fortunate enough to do that, and that just started me on the path to getting the training and earning the Green Beret and getting into the Special Forces Regiment. So
while you're working towards the Special Forces, you're still in the Army serving.
oh yeah, I mean
Okay.
it's so basically what it was for me was that contract pretty much just said, like, you do not have to go serve for 3 years in an infantry or line unit before you try out. It was basically like, okay, you can try out. If you don't make it, you're going to the 82nd, or you are going to Korea, or you were going to go to the 101st, or you were going to go into the infantry. So that was always, you went to boot camp as a 11 Bravo, which is an infantry guy. That's what you're trained on. And I went to airborne school right after boot camp. And then I went to a month-long preparation course for selection. And then I went to SFAS. I mean, I was in Special Forces selection 8 months after joining, after going off to boot camp. I mean, it was a pretty quick pathway, and it didn't work out for everyone, but, fortunately it worked out for me, and it kind of set me on for the rest of the stuff I did in my career. Yeah.
Yeah. So we hear a lot. Go ahead. Jump in.
No, I was gonna. I mean, so Tom and I know some SEALs. We've been fortunate enough to do some stuff for them. What is the what are the differences between the SEAL community? I shouldn't say SEAL community, but the SEAL not mindset, but mission.
Yep.
And Delta, and there's a difference in age also, isn't there? Like the average Delta guy's like 35, I think.
Yeah,
it's a bit younger.
Yeah. So, I will say, well, there's a big misconception, and it's a lack of knowledge and terminology amongst, I would say, the general public. And this is not a bad thing. It's just, you hear on the news, Special Forces, Special Operations, and Special Operations encompasses a lot of units from all branches of the military. The term Special Forces is designated for U.S. Army Green Berets. So when you hear someone say, "Hey, SF," or he was a Green Beret, he is in Special Forces. Like the Ranger battalions, the Ranger, 75th Ranger Regiment has 3 battalions, and they're Special Operations, but they don't consider themselves, and no one else does, Special Forces. They're still Spec Ops, but they have a little bit different job and a little bit different title, right? So the SEALs, it's funny you say that, because my shooting partner in sniper school was a SEAL from Team 2, and I actually got to learn a lot about the SEAL teams through my month and a half working every day with this guy, the SEALs, obviously. The water is their bread and butter, maritime operations, they are phenomenal at, underwater stuff, boats, any riverine, you name it, man. I mean, that's their bread and butter. But they also conduct, obviously, land warfare, and they do, I would say the white side SEALs who are not Dev Group, they kind of, from my knowledge, they work in, teams about the size of a Special Forces team, 10 to 12, something like that. And they conduct, patrols, they conduct raids, they do pretty much everything that I knew that the Army Special Op guys did. They have a little bit different. There's some differences in their tactics. Particularly, like, I would say, building clearances. There's some differences in how I would clear a building and how they would. I'm not saying right or wrong or indifferent. It's just, 2 different ways to skin that cat, or multiple ways to skin it. But the Green Berets do not work unilaterally. And that is the main difference between Army Special Forces Green Berets and Delta, or the SEALs, or, some of the MARSOC guys, the pararescue guys. Like, Green Berets are trained to go in and link up, embed, advise, equip, train, and lead host nation forces on missions. And nowhere else is a special operations unit. That's their main focus. So like,
Hey, Zach, I want to get this clear. It's more in my mind, I think. So you're not Delta, you're Green Beret Special Forces. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, when I first went in, I had a contract to try out for for Green Berets. Okay. So I became a Green Beret and I was assigned to 3rd Special Forces Group as a weapons sergeant. And I served with them for a little over 3 years. And then I went to sniper school where I just mentioned, my shooting partner, my shooting buddy was a SEAL. And I ran into as the first 2 guys from Delta I ever got to like talk to and be around. Cause it's a big, I was on Fort Bragg and everyone knows where that compound is, but there's a lot of secrecy and rightfully so, about what goes on over there, and what their mission sets are and things like that. It's kind of like, we always called it like the chocolate factory, like, Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. So I met these 2 guys and, I just started chatting with them, man. Like, hey, what's your op tempo like? Like, what do you guys typically, and they weren't telling me anything they shouldn't have told me. They were just, and the next thing I was like, I want to try for that. So I went to selection again for Delta. So I went to 2 different selections, one for Special Forces, and then I became a Green Beret and served in the Green Beret regiment in 3rd Group. And then I tried out for Delta, and then I served with Delta for a few years as well.
Hey, Zach, I guess the difference for the general public, if they can understand, so you have Green Beret, then you have Delta, you have SEAL teams, and then you have Dev Group. So they're kind of like,
yes,
the nuances are similar, I think.
Yeah, 100%. So there's 2 tier 1 units in the entire U.S. Department of Defense, 2, and that's Delta and Dev Group. And they are the country's premier surgical strike force that can launch and be anywhere in the world quickly to conduct operations, counterterrorism, hostage rescue, or capture kill missions for high value targets. And that is kind of, if you look at like the piracy that was going on, it's probably still going on, in the Horn of Africa, the SEALs were going in there and jumping in and going into Somalia to rescue people or take down people from some of the Somali based organizations, or they were Captain, I think Phillips, they rescued Captain Phillips, and Delta's got a bunch of hostage rescues under their belt as well. And I would say hostage rescue is the hardest mission that they train for, but it's they conduct a lot of raids. You know what I mean? I mean, they're the guys. Those 2 units are the ones who are going after guys like Bin Laden, going after high ranking ISIS guys in Syria and Iraq, and and that's no secret. I mean, it's but that's the main difference. And then you have tier 2, which would be Green Berets, your what is called Whiteside SEALs, and then Army Rangers, and that kind of makes up the tier 2 units. And they may be classified differently now, but there's Dev Group and Delta are the 2 premier surgical strike tier 1 counterterrorism hostage rescue units.
For those that don't know, Dev Group formerly was SEAL Team 6, and that's more recognizable from the general public.
Yep.
Yeah, now it's Dev Group, which I think is an acronym for developmental group, I believe, right, Zach, or something?
Yeah, I think that's their name. And Team 6, they're still referred to, at least in my circles, as Team 6 as well. It's kind of like CAG, Delta, there's just different names for them,
When I was down in Virginia Beach, one of the leaders of one of the teams was showing me around the base down there. I can't remember where we were. There's other people around, like other civilians around. And he would never say Team 6 in public, right? He says Dev Group, right? I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah. Let me ask you a question. We're going to put you on the spot a little bit here. With the exit from Afghanistan, after all that you guys went through, all the lives were lost and everything, how did you feel about the way that was handled?
Oh, I didn't like it at all. And I'm not bashful to say that. I think it was disgraceful, to be quite honest with you. And I think it spit in the faces of, not guys like me who came home physically whole, but like those Gold Star families. You know, I can only imagine how they felt about it, knowing the, you know, knowing how I felt, you know, and I came back, you know, but we all had friends who didn't, and I can't imagine what their families, you know, their mothers and fathers, their, you know, wives, kids, you know, how they think about it. It's just, it was an absolute, and look, I only know what I see and I read. You know, I'm not privy to any insider information anymore. That I've been out of the Army for almost 10 years now. So I don't have like, you know, I don't get secret information anymore and stuff like that. I see what you guys see, but I mean, when you leave helicopters and billions of dollars in armament and munitions to the people that, you know, aided and abetted in the murder of 3,000 of our civilians, and then cause a 20-year conflict, it's disgusting. And I don't care how you skin it, there's no excuse for it. You know,
yeah, like how does it happen, right? Like you can't think far enough ahead to get that equipment out of there. That's the part. It's like,
yeah,
you just don't get it.
Yeah, I don't know, and you know, I've spoken to a few guys who were over there kind of during that withdrawal, and it was just, you know, none of them said anything short of like there was no plan, it was chaotic, and it was just a disaster.
That's
you know,
amazing.
and right at the end of it, would we have 13 or 15 people killed in a suicide bombing? Like, you know what I mean? It's and you know, I know one of those gentlemen, I don't know him personally, but I know that he testified recently. I believe he was a Marine. I think he lost an arm and a leg. And, you know, he was on, I believe, the Sean Ryan podcast. And I think he testified in front of Congress as well. You know, and it's just, it's unacceptable, you know, and I don't know any other way to say it. You know, it's just, I just I don't think it was thought out. I don't think a lot of things were taken in consideration. And I think it was done extremely hastily and just, it was bad.
Now I can't remember. Was there a timetable why they had to pull out that quickly? They made that decision. Well,
I don't
No,
think so.
it was political. It wasn't tactical. Biden chose to do it on 9/11, right? So it was totally political. The continuance I'm reading today, and again, like Zach, I know what I hear, what I read, but apparently they're using the biometrics now to use against their own people. One of the things, and Zach, you can speak to it better than I can, but they try to get biometrics of every male, I think, in the entire region. But now that the Taliban is using that against their own people, but in continuous to that, and then it's just to Zach's point, to leave all that armament behind, it was just disgusting.
Yeah, and I mean, look, it's one thing to Afghanistan. It had to end at some time. We had to get out of, and this is my opinion. You know, just my opinion. You know, we can't be there forever. Now, we can't be there in a large scale forever. But number one, the pulling out the way that we did, it was just atrocious. And then number two, like, I just don't think we left and set them up for what was coming next. You know, which was, you see it everywhere. We pull out of Iraq, and what happens in that vacuum? ISIS. You know what I mean? Like, and now we're dealing with a whole nother problem set. And look, I'm not a politician, and I'm damn sure not a general. And those guys get paid to make those big decisions. You know, I got out of the Army as a E7, but you know, I'm not an idiot. and I do, you know, I have studied history to a degree, and every time we do this, it's a problem. You know, we pulled out of, you know, Vietnam, the same thing happened. And I don't know what the answer was. I wasn't alive back then, but I do know the answer in Afghanistan was not to do it the way that we did. And, you know, that's my opinion.
do you think we should have gone to Afghanistan at all?
100% yes. Yeah. I mean, there's, you know, there is, there's no way to turn the other cheek after what happened there. And there had to be an overwhelming response to them flying planes into our buildings here. I don't personally think, Iraq is a completely different country with a completely different history and set of issues. But, we didn't go to Afghanistan for anything to make sure that like Al-Qaeda did not have freedom of movement to keep planning attacks against us, and it had to be, I think we made some mistakes early on, as far as, maybe not keeping the pressure on the way we should have. But that's all me Monday morning quarterbacking as a civilian before I came in. The first 2 years of the war, I wasn't in. I came in in the fall of 2003, almost 2 years right after 9/11. But yeah, 100%. You know what I mean? I mean, I think you see a lot of this now. When you don't have the willingness to hit and to hit hard, people probe you and they take advantage of you, right? And they come in and they start poking a little bit. What's he going to do? Oh, they're not going to do anything. All right, well, we're going to poke a little bit more. And it's just, it's reconnaissance. You know what I mean? And, if we hadn't have done something there, I think it would have opened up. It would have just been bad. There would have been more and more of it happening. That would have been popping up in other destabilized countries, that couldn't police themselves. And we would have just had a much greater problem in our hand. And, we went in there and kicked their ass in the first 6-7 months.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, it was an absolute lopsided ass whooping. And then, and then the things change, the Taliban was on the run, Al-Qaeda was on the run. And now it's, things get a little bit different. And then, fast forward at 20 years and, Afghanistan was never, in my opinion, going to become a democracy, not a fully functioning one. I don't think the purpose for us going there was to liberate the Afghan people from the Taliban. I think that was maybe a second or third, intention. But the intention of us going in there and putting the pressure on the people that planned for that attack, in my opinion, it had to happen.
Yeah.
Like
I talked to one SEAL that's still in, and he said, listen, flat out, it was after the exit from Afghanistan. He says, flat out, it was revenge. We went there for revenge, which I think that's fantastic. Like you said, you have to show them that if you do this to us, we're coming after you, right?
Yeah. I mean, and it's not like, I think it was 97 when they when Al-Qaeda bombed our embassies in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam. In my opinion, the war on terror should have fucking started that day. And I was in high school, and then Clinton was in office, and I think it was in 97 when those two embassies got killed. Like, and yes, there was a response, right? We launched a bunch of cruise missiles, but if, hindsight 2020, would 9/11 have ever happened if we had given our enemies that type of response in 1997?
Yeah, no kidding.
Or when the U.S. coal was bombed. There's been a bunch of incidents. We have short-term memories as Americans. We got really short-term memories, and that shit was going on way before 9/11, way before. And I just, I don't sit and ponder about it, but I think like if we had given them both barrels in the late 90s and taken bin Laden out, it may have never happened, So I think we need to learn from that. I think history is very important for us.
Here's another friend of ours, another veteran. Keith
Yeah.
Randall perfectly said, it sickens me hearing these people say these days we didn't belong in Afghanistan. Well said. Well said.
Thank you, Keith.
Well, Keith was he a Marine? Or he is a Marine?
Keith was Navy.
Navy.
I believe he was deployed in Iraq. I'm not entirely sure.
Good to see you there, brother. All right, I want to stay. I like talking about all this stuff, but I want to get to what you're doing now. What is the company you have?
Yeah. So I've been working in the private sector as an instructor since I got out of the military. And I worked for a company for about 7 years. And COVID happened, just things happened in my personal life. Obviously, COVID, the economy, a lot of things got shut down. We were all negatively affected by that. And a guy had gotten to know another former Delta member of Delta. It's kind of weird how this all happened. Like, I called him up because he had a good network. His name's Charlie. He's the owner of Hades. And I was looking for work, because I was hurting for money, and nothing in this industry, no one could come together. Law enforcement couldn't come together and train, and that's what I did. So, I was kicking up every bush, looking underneath everything, like just trying to get, through that year and a half. And I called him and I said, "Hey man, if you know anyone out there who's got contracting, I don't care if it's overseas, like, I'll go do it." And he called me back, like a week later, and he's like, "Man, nothing's going on, but I've been thinking about starting a training company. Would you like to join?" And I was like, "Absolutely, man." And it all started in a little phone call like that, and here we are. We are right at 3. Next January we'll be entering year 4 in January, and it's been awesome. And so basically, what we do is, I am a firearms and a tactics instructor. So and I've also done some stuff like I've done some security consulting for residences and businesses as well. But what we do is we're a training company, and we go around the country and we try to sharpen the sword of our nation's first responders. And it's a very, I find it to be probably just as important as what I did in the military, if not more.
I agree totally. Mark and I have had this discussion before. Like, when they talk about defunding the police, I'm thinking, you're crazy. We need more money. They need to be trained more. Right?
And that's the thing. I'm sorry, Zach, but the training that Zach and I were attending that day, it's the same guys all the time. They're LEO, they're Secret Service, they're Tier 1 guy, but it's always the same guys, which is what, maybe less than 20% of their agency, right, Zach? I mean, so
yeah,
it's
I love law enforcement guys, girls. I love anyone who is doing the job for the right reasons. Mm-hmm. And if there's someone who wants to get better at what they need to do to protect their communities, I will go through hell and high water to make them 2% better, whatever that is. If it's them understanding, how to get their gun out of the holster and their sights on target 0.2 of a second faster, that could be the difference. Not so much in them going home, but them saving somebody. Or, we work with a lot of tactical teams on their clearance and techniques, how they enter and clear buildings for active shooters and barricaded suspects who have hostages and stuff like that. And, I love the job because it keeps me, it's a way to keep me in the fight. You know what I mean? Like, I still feel like I'm being a man of service, and that's important for me personally. Like, I need that on a personal level. If I went and did a job that was just self-fulfilling, just for me to make money, I probably wouldn't be good at it, and B, it probably wouldn't last too long. I had a quick story. I was in Nashville not too long ago, a couple weeks ago. We were doing a class, and we worked with those guys a bunch. And they had a recent active shooter out there where a female went into a private school and killed a couple people, and then the officer went in there and neutralized the threat. And one of the guys that was in this class, he's a young, hungry cop, man, who is he wants to do SWAT stuff, and he wants to do it for the right reasons. And he came up to me after that class. He's like, "Hey man, I don't know if you remember the last time you were out here, we were shooting pistol." He goes, "The only reason I'm here in this class and trying out for this SWAT team is because I failed my pistol qual 3 years in a row to make it on the SWAT team." He's like, "I came to y'all's class and I learned in 2 days so much, and I went out and I passed that qual, and here I am." And
That's cool. That's good.
put his hand out and he said, "Thank you." And I was like, it almost, I mean, it's awesome, man.
Yeah.
So I love doing that. And you know, I will dedicate my free time, whatever it is, to just, it's an important job. And I think, I think we need, like, there's a guy that I train jiu-jitsu with. I'm not going to say his name because I don't have permission, but he's a young man. He's probably 22. He's in shape. He's good looking. He's hungry and he wants to be a cop. And I told him, I was like, "Man, this country needs you. Like, guys like you around the US, we need guys like you who, when they put the uniform on, they look the part, they act the part. They're intelligent, they're respectful. And if they need to throw down, they can fucking throw down."
Yeah.
Hey, Zach,
And don't you think they make it safer for everybody when you know how to throw down? Right?
It does.
Yeah.
I mean, I think all these excessive force crap going on is because of is poor training.
Totally.
You know what I mean? If you got to beat the death out of someone with the club, where you could have just taken him down, gift wrapped him, put him on his stomach, and work your cuffing techniques. Training makes everyone safer.
Yeah,
It
totally.
makes the bad guys safer. It makes the public safer. It makes the good guys safer. And there's just this allergic reaction, you know, or too much of an allergic reaction to guys training the hard skills.
Yeah. And can civilians come to your classes as well?
Yeah. I mean, we do not currently offer tactical courses for civilians. And that's not, look, I am all for the general public and the Second Amendment, like the general public knowing how to defend themselves. And, I'm a staunch advocate in the Second Amendment. The problem that we have, it's more of it's hard to get big classes filled up with what we need from a business perspective. And it's kind of hard for me to say that, but like it's just true. Now I've taught countless people from the general public in our shooting courses. The challenge we have with that is that a lot of the places that we get brought into are police facilities, and under their insurance policies, if guys aren't, if they don't have, they're not badged, then legally or under the insurance policies, they're not allowed to shoot there. But we're doing more and more, and we're getting asked to come to more and more places where anybody, can sign up and come take our two-day pistol class with us, which I love training the public.
And have you got a website, someplace that people can get a hold of?
Yeah, it's Hades Unleashed, HADES Unleashed.com. And that's Hades Consulting's website, and all the classes are typically launched on there. And then Instagram, Hades Consulting on Instagram is probably the best way to follow like all of our current stuff, I would say.
You know what? You know what you should do too? You should do public speaking. Your voice and the way you talk. You ever done that?
I actually have done quite a bit. Yeah. I've done some I've done for like annual business conferences. I've been brought in to do like kind of like some leadership discussions. I've been asked to come to the most fun that I've had is a friend of mine up here who's a head coach. He's a police officer. I'm not going to mention names that I haven't asked to, but good guy. And he's a head coach of a football team up here in New Jersey. And he asked me to come speak. His team was struggling like 2-3 years. Like, they were struggling to get like one W a year. And they had their homecoming game last year. And he asked me to come out, and I came and spoke to him in the week during practice, and then he didn't know it, but I came up to him at halftime. He brought me in the locker room at halftime. They were in this really tight game against like their crosstown rivalry. Yeah. And I just gave them this Spartan phalanx, like drive their asses off the cliff into the fucking water talk. And man, these kids came out and just blew this team. It was so fun, man.
That's cool.
So I would like to do more and more public speaking. It is something that I actually kind of enjoyed doing.
Yeah, you're good
and
too.
opportunities in the past. So yeah, but thank you for that.
Yeah, very good.
Exactly. Explain. So your company emblem is SSVA, and everybody in our kind of tactical world understands what that is. But can you explain to Tom and the whole concept of your hat, the hash marks, and the SSVA?
Yeah. So if try to put it up there. So Charlie, let me get this, much smarter than me. He designed this logo funny story. He actually drew it on a napkin in a diner in North Carolina, and he took a picture of it and he sent it to me. And this was like 2 weeks after we had that phone call. He literally drew it on a napkin, and he's like, "What do you think?" I'm like, "It looks good to me, man." He's like, "All right, sold," and that was it. And so the north seeking arrow, the upward arrow, has two meanings: loyalty and truth. And then the three cross hashes mean surprise, speed, balance of action, which are the principles, in my opinion, of every fight, not just CQB. It's every fight applies those principles: surprise, speed, balance of action. And, those are the principles of CQB. We teach a lot of CQB, and, Charlie had a good idea, and it was just like, there was no corrections made to it. He drew it once and I was like, dude, that looks awesome. And that's it, and then he just put the colors to it and put the stamp on it, and here we go.
That's the best way to do it, right? Make up your mind and just go do it. Yeah.
Yeah, man. And that's kind of how we operate. So
Cool.
it's a good relationship we have.
All right, everybody. So this is Zach Harrison, and the name of the company is Hades. Public speaker, trainer. You can do it all. Let me ask you, you mentioned money there a while ago. Do you think the veterans are treated well enough by the country?
I do. Okay. I personally do. And I will just, and this is all my perspective is, I have never had a negative interaction. I've never had any type of something where I felt I was not treated properly. And look, I don't feel like I should be treated any way other than just a normal guy. I mean, that's just, myself and no one that I know and respect that I work with, and none of them did anything for anyone else to pat them on the back ever. I've never wanted, I don't even park, like, I've got multiple Purple Hearts, and I've never parked in a Purple Heart parking spot ever. I've never parked in a veteran disabled parking spot. I've never parked in a veteran. I don't do that stuff. And the reason I don't do it is because in my mind, someone behind me is going to be in a wheelchair and they need the fucking spot more than I do. Yeah. And I don't blast out anywhere. I think, I personally know that Donald Trump fixed the VA. And I think that was one of the big problems. We've had a ton of injuries in the military. I mean, this war there are a ton of guys who, have lost legs, lost arms, just bad life altering injuries. And I think there was problems with the VA before then. And the only way I say that's because I have friends who were involved with it. One of my former teammates, a guy named Dave, good friend of mine, he was injured with me during one of our incidents, and then he got hit again real bad a couple years later, real bad. He had over 50 surgeries in a 2-year period in Walter Reed, and he told me, kind of on the back end of it, he's like, man, they're finally getting this place fixed. They moved his family up there. They put his family up. So I personally think this country is doing a good job. Hey, there's always going to be guys, and this is just my experience and the experience of people that I know. I'm sure there's incidents of guys who are, having problems, and, they have they have different historicals with that. But, I have not, I look at it like this. During the Vietnam War, so a lot of soldiers came home, and I would say they were not treated properly. And I wasn't even alive then. And I'm just talking about what I know, what I've read, what I've seen, books and, everything. And I don't know anyone who's walked around this country in a military uniform who got spit on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, called a baby killer or any of this stuff. Has it happened? I'm sure it's happened somewhere. But I think our country, even the people who don't think we should have gone to war after 9/11, I think deep down, they realized these guys were doing their job and someone had to go do it. So if you don't have anything nice to say, shut the fuck up. I'm sorry for cussing, but
No, that's all right.
yeah.
So some of our listeners are asking how old you are, Zach.
44.
44. Nice.
44.
And you hold on. So I got to go back to something. You have multiple Purple Hearts. You've been awarded multiple Purple Hearts.
Yes.
Wow.
3.
So Dave was the driver that time when you guys got ambushed. Zach, is that the story?
Well, I was with Dave for 2 of mine. We had a joke after the second one, like, "Hey man, we need to separate and get on different vehicles, man." But yeah, so the first time I got and look, all of mine have been I don't say the term lucky. I've been blessed. I don't believe in luck not anymore. I used to, but I've gotten a little bit of shrapnel on my shoulder from an RPG that went off pretty close to us. I was involved in an IED where we lost a teammate, and myself, everyone on our truck was injured. One guy, Bill Brown, he didn't survive. And then I was shot. I got shot through the leg a couple years later when I went to Iraq. The only trip I went, I only got to go to Iraq one time. And yeah, I got shot with a pistol during that one. So I've had a lot of close calls. I did 10 years, and I comparatively to a lot of special operations guys, and I want everyone to know this. I have 4 rotations. 4. I can probably name you 10 guys I know personally who have more than 15.
Mm-hmm.
And the public doesn't realize that, right? I'm not going to say his name, but a guy I've gotten to know recently, and he's come and worked with us a little bit at Hades, has 19. 19. I mean, think about that. In a just over 20-year career, the man deployed to combat 19 times. And it is amazing. The men in these communities, like, it's a different breed. And that's a cliche term to use, but by God, it's true.
Yeah.
Do you think you go in as a different breed, or you become a different breed from all your training experiences?
I think you're born with it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the Army and the military hones it. And a lot of guys ask me this. And there's guys I respect who have a completely different opinion on this. They're like, "Hey man, can you teach mindset?" And I'm like, in my opinion, you can. Well, think about this. How many people were drafted in Vietnam who had never been in probably a physical altercation in their life, and 4 months later, they're killing people? Where does that come from? Survival instinct? Probably. You know what I mean? Part of it. But like, the military's been taking people off the street for centuries and turning those people into doing things that probably went against everything in their nature. Now, I say that with a grain of salt, right? I think guys got to be born with a little something, and then the Army can manifest that and make that grow, right? But yeah, so like, true, like, hey, you got to be thinking about this. We don't talk about that stuff when hey man, I'm just teaching you to get your gun on that target sooner. You've got to figure out everything. You got to figure out the backside of that. You know what I mean? And what goes on before that. I'm just trying to make you be a little bit more efficient on your skills. And, it's like, think about someone who's never, Coach, Mark, you're a boxing coach,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Over the years, Zach, I've had parents call me and say, "Hey, can you give my son or daughter boxing lessons?" I say, "Sure," because we want to make them tougher. I'm like, "No, I can teach them how to box. I can't make them tougher." To your point, Zach, you're either born with it or not. And Tom, I know you probably played with thousands of guys in pro hockey that probably could have been a fighter, but just didn't have that that instinct or that willingness to engage.
Yeah.
And I really think, like, I look at all the guys, man, and I've got like a bunch of mentors that I look up to, you know, and my business partner is one of them. I mean, he's way more experienced than I am. And like, I look at a guy like that. He came in at 17. You know what I mean? He came at 17. So this man from 17 until 2 years ago, his late mid 30s, did nothing but train for and prepare to go to war. And it's what he's done his entire life.
Mhm.
And I think, going back to your stuff with the public, I think the public generally supports what the veterans do, whether they agree with the politics or not. Right. Well, what they don't understand is the sacrifice that a man like that has made.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Who as a kid said, "Hey man, I'm going to do this."
Ooh,
And I'm not going
17 years old. Oh man.
Yep. And you know, that other guy I was just mentioning, 19 rotations. People don't understand the cost that is associated with it. It's not free. None of that shit is free. There's a cost. There's a cost to your family. There's a cost to your mental well-being. There's a cost physically, emotionally, spiritually. There's a cost. And I think that's what's more lost on the American public more than, hey, should we have been there or should we not have been there? You know, and that's, again, just personal takes on that.
I want to make sure you see what some of the people are writing here too. God bless and thank you for your service. My brother is a Marine, did 3 tours. Huh?
Thank you, Tracy.
And how long is a rotation?
It depends. So when I was with a third group, so before I had gone to selection for Delta, the typical rotations there were, when I got there, were 8 months.
Oh, wow.
It was roughly 8 months on. And third group was one of those units, man, that from the jump was constantly going over there. 8 months on, 6 months off, 8 months on. You know what I mean? And when I got to third group in 2005, they had 4 years of constant rotations already, you know? So eight months. And then, you know, at times I heard they kicked them up to 12. And then there was 4-month rotations that also went on. Like I know the Rangers used to typically deploy in 4-month cycles, and some other units did as well. And I think it was just, it's basically what task force you're assigned to and how much work there is, it all comes down to like manning, resources, how much work there is. Hey, we got to give these guys enough time back or we're going to burn them all out. But like, you know, back then it was, you know, I went overseas my first time I met my team. I went over halfway through their rotation. So I was only there for like 4 months that trip. We came back for 4 months and then we went again, you know, same unit. So it depends. And then, you know, what was really crazy was they were taking infantry units, and this was 2007, 8, 9, 10, maybe. They were taking 82nd, 101st, you know, the big infantry units, and they were doing like 18-month rotations. And think about what that does. A year and a half, you know what I mean? And that's going back to the same shit they were doing in World War II. Like you're going over there and you ain't coming back until the war's over. You know?
Vietnam was 13.
Yeah. And then Vietnam, they changed it because they realized like Vietnam was a prolonged war. And, you know, guys would get drafted and they'd do 12, 13 months. And that was their rotation. If they were drafted, they did their one trip, and then they were done, you know. And then some guys who were not wanted to go more, you know, there's plenty of guys who did 3-4 rotations over there. And
Billy Baud did, I think, 7 rotations in Vietnam. Yep.
And I got to speak to a couple SF guys who did 3 or 4, and you know, it's just, there's a toll, man. And I think, and I'm not speaking for me personally, but the public needs to understand the sacrifices that these men went through. And it's not just the dangers of getting hurt or killed, right? It is everything else that comes along with, yeah, man, I will continue to go do this over and over and over again. And there's a toll for it, and it's not free. And I think that's the biggest thing that people need to keep in mind. 22 years this war went on.
And they can be walking around looking like they're fine too, but it's the mental struggles too, correct?
Yeah. I mean, there's no secret about, the mental side of stuff and but the strength and the resiliency and the grit that the men I was blessed to work with have, man, it is remarkable. It's remarkable. And, I hope I can look back, not, when I'm a little bit older and a little bit more gray and just, man, I was fucking proud to work with those men.
Yeah.
You know
what I've noticed too. So like, especially like in Costco, let's say, so you'll see the veterans always wearing their hats around walking in Costco. So I make a point of going up to them and thanking them for the service. And you can tell it just means so much. And so I recommend that to everybody. It's just like 5 seconds, walk over, say thank you for your service. Sometimes they look at you first like, what does this guy want? But then once you say thank you for the service, you can tell they just start to beam too, right there. It's pretty cool.
I got this funny thing that I do. I'll see a guy with a like 82nd Airborne hat on, like an Airborne, and I'll just walk by and I'll go, "What's up, Airborne?"
Oh,
they'll look over and they know if you say like, "Hey, Airborne, how you doing, Airborne?" And they look over at you and they're like, they know,
Cool.
It's funny. And there's a meme. It's been made probably a million times. It's like, yeah, that old bugger who can barely walk wearing that hat was way more of a badass than you could ever be. Like
one guy in Costco, old guy, had a Vietnam hat on, and I went up and said, "Hey, thank you very much for your service." He said, "I was in the area." It's so funny. I just started dying laughing. I was in the area. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, Zach, it's great to meet you. I hope we can stay in touch here again. If anybody wants to get a hold of Zach Harrison, you can go to Instagram. You have your own Instagram page as well, correct?
I do. It's chambered one, I think, _Ziggy is my account. And there's I've done a couple of these and there's some links on there for that. And the one thing I would just ask in your public, man, is, or your audience is just support law enforcement as much as you can. And money is money, but everything these law enforcement guys need costs money, and they don't have the budgets, and they're asked to do things that it's not fair what a lot of cops are asked to do with the training that they're given. But it is what it is, and a fair is a location you go to eat cotton candy, and we just got to make the best with what's out there. But anything that can be done to support them and get them additional training, from medical training to anything, to mental health resources. Law enforcement guys see the horrors of humanity, and they see it on a daily basis, and then they go home. It's a little bit different than what we did. And I think people need to remember that,
And I talk about shaking hands with veterans, and you're right. I should correct myself. The first responders, the same thing. Right? If you see them, go up and thank them. It's like, especially a lot of places, but you go into New York City, some of the stuff that they have to put up with, and you just go up and say hello to them for 2 seconds. It means a lot to them. We've gone to a few events at police stations. I've asked them that. I said, "Is it okay if we go up and shake hands?" I said, "Tom, it's more than okay. We love it when people go up and shake your hands. So just support them." Yep.
Absolutely. And I appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Zach.
It was fantastic, Zach. Really good. Thanks, brother.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Hey, we got to get together soon.
Let's do it, man.